And welcome. This week I thought I'd do something completely different. I was watching some of my GoPro video the other day. I actually shoot a fair bit of GoPro video on all my bikes. And I had a thought, what's the difference in performance and handling between these two quite different motorcycles? They're from completely different eras. My 1991 Moto Guzzi Le Mans really has its roots right back in the 70s, and it has the handling and performance characteristics of a 1970s model of motorcycle. I bet that the 91 model had a little bit more horsepower than the first Le Mans that came out in the early 70s. Now my 2006 Benelli TNT, while it's a little older than what you'd call a current crop of superbikes, the only thing really missing from this in a current sports bike is the fact that it doesn't have any of the rider aids. So it doesn't have anti-lock braking and it doesn't have any form of traction control. It has over 140 horsepower, so really there's a big horsepower difference between the bike. It's also a bit lighter. It's just under 200 kilos wet, whereas this would be probably around 230. I can't recall the exact figure at the moment, so there's a bit of a weight difference. The Moto Guzzi Le Mans also has a slightly longer wheelbase, so it shouldn't be that good in really tight, twisty roads compared to the Benelli. But I guess we'll see when we do the comparison. So what I'll do now is I'll go away, do a split screen, edit two runs together on this same section of road. The same section of road is a fairly tight road, so really the horsepower difference between the bikes really isn't going to make a huge difference to the time from point A to point B. I'll use the same section of road for both runs, obviously, and it'll be about 2.5 minutes of riding. Well, that was interesting, and pretty much as I expected. My 2006 Benelli TNT was quicker than my 1991 Moto Guzzi Le Mans. wasn't that much quicker. It was only really 2 seconds in that video comparison that we just watched. Would have been a little bit more, but there was a cyclist on the Benelli run that I had to slow down and pass safely. So let's say it probably would have been a 4-second difference over 2.5 minutes. That's not a significant difference between the two bikes, is it? Part of that could come down to the fact that I ride pretty much the same style on both bikes, but I don't think that's it. I mean, the Moto Guzzi Le Mans, being an old school motorcycle, requires counter steering on the bars, and it has a fairly long wheelbase, so you really have to muscle it through corners a little bit, particularly the tighter corners. And the riding style is quite different. You're really using engine braking more than you are your front brake on the Le Mans. Plus the front brake is fairly weak by modern standards anyway, and the engine braking really is what assists you getting through corners, particularly in the entrance to corners, and then you accelerate out. I probably did that in just 1 or 2 gears on both bikes. You can pretty much do that whole section of road in 1 gear on both if you want to, but it's just a little bit easier on the motor if you change gears. Now the Benelli TNT has a different riding style through those corners. You're pretty much hustling it up pretty quick between corners, get off the brakes before you really get far into the corner, and then as soon as you hit the apex, accelerating out of the corner as you head to the next corner. So it's more acceleration, stop, whereas the Moto Guzzi Le Mans is really more on throttle control and on braking and acceleration control. So really there is a big difference in style between the two bikes. Now, one of the reasons why I could be pretty much the same on both bikes through that section of road is that I just ride that section of the road at those speeds because they're the speeds that I feel safe at. And you do actually have to allow for the fact that you can't really cut any of those corners. They're blind corners. It's just not safe to do so. So you can only hustle it so far. So, you know, the comparison is really, you know, it's not scientifically based. It's really, I did it just as a bit of fun. And really, it just showed that there's not really that much difference in the real world between two different motorcycles if you are, I suppose, a competent rider. I wouldn't class myself as an expert, but just as a competent rider, you have a tendency to ride whatever you get on pretty much the same. And I think that's really the moral of this story, in that it's not always the motorcycle that makes you better. It really comes down to your skill level. Anyway, that's about it for this particular video, and I'll catch you next time.